Hello, Ryan. You're up next.
Hey Bart. All right, you ready just me to get into it?
You can get into it, sir.
All right, sir. We got it's a 2-5 game with an optional $10 under the gun straddle. It's out of Portsmouth, Virginia at Rivers Casino.
So 2-5, and is it going to be straddled?
It is going to be straddled. This game, in particular, had the straddle was just always on.
Okay, so that was a little bit different than last call. And how deep are you guys?
I'm at 1K effective, and the villain covers me.
Okay, so 1K effective. I think I said this to you. Oh, yes, I did. Because this is actually one of the rare ones where I give a personalized response to all new subscribers that have never had a submission. So if you've never been a subscriber to the site, you can submit a question or a hand, and I record a little podcast, or not a little, whatever, 3 to 6 minutes on the hand, one time. That's what I do. And I recorded this for Ryan, and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, I want to use this hand for the podcast. I thought it was interesting. So I said in the email to you, or I said in my response back to you, that the game setup of a game like this, like with a straddle at 100 BBs, is quite interesting, because 100 BB poker, it's a little bit shallower than in theory on paper because of the large sizing, but I actually like the game. Now, obviously, you can make more money in a deeper game, but one of the best games in LA was and I think, I don't know if they still do it, but 510 mandatory 2,500 cap. That was at Hollywood Park. I played at least 1,000 hours in that game over several years. It was sort of a daytime game. It was great because a lot of the Euros and the tough pros wouldn't come over because there was a cap in the game. So if you find a game like this, it can be quite profitable. What I have seen tends to be a fair amount of recreational players. And again, this is a larger game at 100 big blinds cap. But what I mean by larger is probably like $1,000 plus. It's not very common that you'll see a game like this, but it's interesting. Another thing about Virginia, I know that this is a relatively new card room. I had a buddy in Virginia that used to always complained to me that he'd have to drive to Cherokee a few years ago to actually
That's
get in
where
the.
I used to have to go as
Yep.
well. I used to have to drive 2 hours out to Cherokee, and it was quite a hike.
And I know there's a big military presence, right, over in that area.
Yes, sir.
Virginia
Yes, sir,
Beach.
there is.
Yep. All right. So 2-5-10, 1K effective. Okay.
All right, and so the under the gun straddles the 10, and it folds all the way to the small blind, 2 limps. And then I'm in the big blind with the 2 black 10s, and I raise it up to 50.
So small blind completes, which is a limp. I mean, it's $8, right? I mean, some people will put in. It's a pretty large complete. You're in the middle blind here with black 10s, and you go to 50. Obviously, very standard. Okay.
Yep, under the gun folds, and the small blind just calls.
So straddle folds. And so small blind limp calls. What's the deal with this guy? That's kind of a fishy play.
He is very loose passive. I've seen him. I was only playing in this table for probably about an hour or two, and he limp calls a lot with small pocket pairs. I've seen him do some really weird things, just with absolute trash. So I think I have an edge on this guy.
Okay. So the pot's probably right around 100, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, so the flop comes queen of clubs, queen of spades, 3 of diamonds.
Queen of clubs, queen of spades, 3 of diamonds. Okay. And you've got 10s, and this guy just limp called out of the small blind in the straddle pot. Okay.
Yep, so I'm thinking at this point, I'm putting him on a smaller pocket pair, like 4s, 5s, 6s, maybe 7s. So he checks, and I went ahead and down bet to 40, just trying to get him to stay in.
Yeah, and he might peel with some ace high types of hands too. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, like I said, it's a pretty kind of fishy setup especially at 100 big blinds, like the limp call. So I'm not sure exactly how that is constructed, this limp call range. You know what I mean? Like if it's like a suited ace, but you would think that would probably raise. So it probably leans a little bit more towards pairs or just something that missed. He could also have like a Broadway hand, like queen jack off or something like that too. You know,
Very
of course
true.
I would bet. So you go 40. Okay.
Yep, and then he clicks it back to 80.
Min check raises.
Yep. So I thought about this for a little bit, and given with what I said before, I think he could be doing this with a 3, just not believing me at all, just thinking I'm just making a C bet with any 2. So I just went ahead and made the call.
Like ace 3, you mean, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this guy limp call 3-5 off, 10 six off, just a lot of garbage, and he's playing almost every hand.
Well, I
So
mean, yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, I would be very, very surprised if this is ever a queen on a non-draw heavy board. I mean, it's possible, but you have position, so I mean, it's so easy to continue. Obviously, you'll see how things sort of turn out with his sizing and things like that. But, you know, if I call here and then he checks a brick, of course I'm going to bet again, like in position. But just the whole setup here would be kind of surprising for this to be a queen. But so hero calls, the min check raise, and now we're at 260. Okay.
yes, sir. So the turn comes out to the queen of diamonds.
Another queen.
Yes, sir.
Well, that makes it less likely that he has a queen.
Yeah, so I felt good about this card. I'm thinking that there's very, very few queens that he has here. I think if he was really raising me with a queen, he would have went larger or just tried to trap me.
What else does this do to another very strong hand that maybe once in a while he could raise with on the flop? And I'm not talking about overpairs.
Like pocket threes?
Pocket threes, right? Pocket threes gets counterfeit. So this is great for you. Way less likely that he has a queen, and now you beat pocket threes if you ever had like pocket threes.
Yep. So he just went ahead with 85. I know you said it in your response. It's not quite the same bet, but that idea definitely came up in my head.
So small blind bets 85. Yeah, I mean, I would say that here's the thing with the whole same bet, which is a CLP content sort of definition reference. When I say same bet, it references when somebody check raises you when you have the betting lead on the flop, and they follow up with the same bet or less on an inconsequential turn card, like a blank. So, if somebody check raises you on like Jack Deuce 7 with a 2 flush, and you call with like kings, and then the turn's an offsuit 3 and they same bet you, that's the same bet. It's not when somebody bets the same bet, like when the flush completes, or when a straight comes in, or a sticky card. This one's a little bit. I wouldn't say a queen is necessarily a blank here. It's just an uncommon kind of run out. So I wouldn't necessarily say same bet in that sense, but it doesn't really change anything in terms of whether you were ahead or behind, besides the fact that it was pocket threes. But I don't think that you need to really raise here or anything like that.
I definitely considered it in the moment because the sizing I thought was really weird. I mean, maybe he's trying to get me to hang on, and he's got quads, but I just really discounted that.
Right. So I assume that you called again.
Yes, sir. I call.
All right. So hero calls. Oh, by the way, too, there was one other hand I wanted to throw out at you here. This guy doesn't sound like the type that would do this because of the setup, but once in a great while, you might actually have somebody trapping you with a big overpair. The reason why I don't think that's the case here is because usually when people limp in with aces and kings, they're doing it to limp re-raise as opposed to limp call. You know what I mean? They're the type of player
Right.
that wants to limp re-raise. So it's very, very rare for you to basically have that situation happen. All right, so 430 to the end now. 430, okay.
Yep. And the river comes out. I think it's a brick. It's the 9 of diamonds.
Okay.
Doesn't really change much.
So it's queen, queen, 3, right? Hero's got 10s in the big blind against a small blind limp call with this straddle, which is why we have this set up. By the way, like I said, at the end of this particular live stream and video, I'll be talking about how I feel about chopping in the blinds. And that is quite different than what this is, because you can't really chop like in a 3-blind format. So he min raises you, you call, turns a queen, he bets 85, you call, river's a 9. And obviously, like if he checks to you, backdoor diamonds have come in, but anybody with a pair has a full house. And it's interesting because here's the question that I have for you. At what point do you raise if he bets? Like for example, at what sizing? Or do you just not expect? Are you just always calling? Like if he were to bet like 150, if he were to bet 100, if he were to bet 250, at what point would you consider raising for value?
I considered it. I was prepared for him to bet again. If he was going to use another small sizing, I was definitely going to raise him. But depending on his sizing, if he went anywhere over half pot, I was probably just planning on calling and just seeing what he was doing.
Okay. So what happened here?
So he checks,
Okay, that's great.
and yep. So I'm thinking I'm definitely good here, and
Hmm.
so I went ahead and bet 225. How do you feel about the sizing, by the way?
Well, the only thing I'll say is that I mean, who knows what this guy is doing, but I think you actually have to bet. I mean, yeah, it has to be a value bet because I think you just have to have the best hand here, as played. But there are so few bluffs in your. It's very, very hard to get called by some of like the pair types of holdings here if he's any type of player. And the reason why I say that is because if you were bluff catching him with ace high and like you thought he was sort of full of shit, I think that you just check back here a lot, right? Like, so when you bet, it's like it almost has to be value, unless you were just totally floating him with air. Now, a lot of people can't necessarily put that together, but I kind of want to go on the small side for that reason. The other thing too is that like if he does have a hand like a 3 or 5s or 6s, like a 9 is yet another sort of card that he loses to. So I don't think you go large here. I think it's probably a really small bet, 100 to 150, something like that.
Okay. So he tanks for a while. It was a good solid 2.5 minutes, and he vocally says, "Fuck it, I'm all in."
Oh, well, that's a little bit troubling all in. So
Yeah.
the problem here is that I just think that a lot of these hands that like you that want to bluff catch you, like pairs, will call and not raise.
Yeah, I was sick when he jammed. I'm thinking that if he just didn't believe me with a small pocket pair, he would call. And I'm thinking, how often is this a queen?
Because the other thing too, again, it's like one of these things where I was talking about like on a four flush board, where if you don't have the nut, one card, like if this guy doesn't have a queen, you can have a queen. Now I know you raise pre-flop, but still, you can still have a queen here. So it's almost maniacal for somebody to make a play on a board like this where both players can easily have the nuts because it's just one card. So it's very, very similar to having like a four flush where the ace is the nut, even more so on a high board because you probably raise a lot of queen X here as opposed to like if it was like deuce, deuce, three deuce. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
because you raise pre-flop. So I don't know. I mean, again, I've seen some wacky stuff, but I might well, you could say some people on, might look on this on paper, but I might really want to fold here given the situation because, yeah, this is, I don't like it that much. I
I
really
didn't
don't
like
like
it
it.
either.
Yeah.
So, do you think, before I tell you what the result was, do you think it would be better as a check back, or do you think, I mean, I have to go for value
Well,
here?
I was thinking about that in the beginning of the street when we talked about this, that sometimes, and I think this was Phil Galfond that said this way back when, it's a really good, it's a really good sort of, I don't know if you'd call it poker idiom, where like when your perceived range is strong, you have to value bet less often. And when your perceived range is weak, you can value bet more often and bluff less, if you follow what I'm saying. And
Right.
I think here, your perceived range has to be pretty strong. It really has to be pretty strong. So sometimes in an extreme example, you could make a case for checking back, but it's live poker and you've got the best hand here like 99% of the time, which is why I like a small bet. So it's not crazy to consider it, but I would still bet. Now, at this case, I don't know. I mean, like I said, like a live player, an online player might look like LOL, call. Well, it's just the bluffing frequency here is so small, and the problem is that a lot of these hands are not going to turn into a bluff. So
Yeah, and I
I could
just
see
I thought
folding
a
here.
lot that these giant river raises at the end are a lot heavily weighted towards value, and I'm thinking, this is, in my head, I'm thinking this is a queen or this is nothing really. I don't think that there's anything else he's doing this with. But with the history that I'd seen at the table and everything, I just decided, someone once told me like when things don't make sense, sometimes it's better to flick in a call and just live with your decision. So after I sat there for probably 5 minutes. I
Do
felt bad. I
things
was taking
do
it.
do things to you not make sense here? You don't think it makes sense that he would check quads? You mean at the end? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think that quads go all in here. I think that maybe he tries to click it back or just tries to raise an amount that I can call with, a hand like that I have.
I mean, if a guy's got quads here, again, obviously it doesn't sound like this is any type of thinking player, but if a guy's got quads, the issue with checking is that you don't get the calls from maybe some of your bluff catching range that's going to check back. And my God, you're even considering checking back tens, right? So
Right.
it can be a huge, huge blunder to check here, expecting you to, like, yeah, sure, you'll have some value bets that you think are good, but you might also have some bluff catchers that you're going to check back that you would otherwise call. So, yeah, I mean, maybe you can convince you. So it sounds to me like you called.
Yeah, I flicked in the call and he shows 7-7. Pocket
And
seven.
I assume that, so small blind has 7-7, and I assume that he thought when you called he was beat.
Yes. So he thought, I don't know what he thought. He said, what it didn't make any sense to me. He said, I put you on a flush, is what he said. And I did not know how to respond to that. And I kind of was shocked to see sevens. I don't know what I was expecting to see. I was really expecting.
Wait a minute. He put you on a flush, so he's bluffing pocket sevens on a queen, queen three, queen nine board, or he thought you would call with a flush with trips on board.
I think he thought I would call it with the flush.
So he wasn't bluffing then. He was doing it for value.
I think he was doing it for value. I do.
Well, who knows what this guy's talking about, but that's sometimes the problem that you can get into with like trying to figure some of these hands out or get into somebody's head with like, I don't even call it live reads, but even sometimes with live hand rating. If the guy doesn't even understand the situation, it can be, you can end up making the wrong decision because they think they are somehow overvaluing their hand. Now, I would have given this guy more credit to realize that like you're not going to bet a flush with trips out there the way that this hand went down, but who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I didn't get that. I was very confused. I thought about it for a day at least afterwards. Of what did he
But the
really do?
reason why I'm asking you about this, and the reason why it might be possible, is that it's so, and this is why this is a hard hand to break down. It's so strange for him to take that hand and do this with that I don't know what he's doing. Like, I don't know if he thinks it's value or not. It's like one of these ones where someone turns over a hand. Sometimes I have this on poker commentary. I don't know what they're doing. Do they think it's a bluff? Do they think it's value? I don't know. I mean, one of the other things too that could be said, although you have so many Queen X here, it's probably suicide. Another CLP content reference is that sort of the approach to check raise bluffing at the end from someone's perspective from up front, again, maybe not necessarily on this board, is actually to take a hand that can sometimes win if it goes check check. So taking a hand with some showdown value and then turning it into a bluff. Because if you've totally missed from up front and you check and it goes check check, you lose. But sometimes you have a hand that can win if it goes check check. But when your opponent bets, there might be a situation where, the situation might be that there's higher EV to actually bluff as opposed to call, to raise as opposed to call. Again, in this spot, you have so many Queen X. It seems like it's suicide, but I just wanted to go over that. Thank you very much for the call,
Yep.
Ryan.
Thank you, Bart.